Montana has a rich Native American culture and history, and I just think the lives of our students as they grow into adulthood are made that much richer by knowing their neighbors and the history of their neighbors and the history of the Native peoples in Montana. So it's a lifelong connection, I hope, for all of Montanans to value that. I think that we have a real asset with Mr. Huisken's commitment in this area. He's studied deeply in his postgraduate work in this area, so we use him as a resource and value what he's doing and hope that he can be a resource for the rest of the state.
Hi, my name is Dlyan Huisken. I'm the 2019 Montana Teacher of the Year, and I teach at Bonner School in Bonner, Montana. What I mean when I think of Indian Ed for All is that we are providing an education where all students are learning about Montana and their place. All students feel included, all students feel seen, no student feels invisible, like their history is not part of the curriculum. I really want to make sure all Montana schools don't treat Native American history or tribal history as just something you might get in an elective, but as something that is woven throughout the curriculum naturally, not like it's just this token lesson that we have to do in order to say we're being inclusive. It is just naturally part of the history of our place, and all students understand that, and their lives are enriched because of it. If I'm using Indian Ed for All sources in the classroom, what that often looks like is I might present students with a source that they may have seen before. Maybe it's a letter, maybe it's an interview, maybe it's a picture. And it's something you might typically find in a textbook or referenced in a textbook. But then I also, to supplement that, would provide perhaps an oral tradition from a tribe of the region, or perhaps archaeological sources or archaeological findings of the region that make sure students get the understanding that it's not just about what one person wrote down and how they saw it. It is about understanding the whole picture as best we can. From my perspective, what students enjoy most about Indian Ed for All is how eye-opening it can be. One thing we try to do a lot in my classroom is detect bias, reflect on bias, and then reject that bias in books that we may have been exposed to when we were younger. So, for example, kids might look through old picture books of George Washington, and they might get a lot of the Founding Father information, a lot of the General Washington information, the President Washington information, but they're not getting the information on how he felt he should deal with Native tribes. They're not reading the letters he wrote to his commanding officers on how to engage with the Iroquois, for example. This is our Declaration of Independence. It's the document that made us a nation. Once it was signed by the so-called Founding Fathers, we became an independent country. We began our war with the British for our independence. George Washington was the head general. So in this document, the Founding Fathers list reasons for leaving England and the King. Here's why we want to be independent. Here's why we want to be our own country. A whole list. So, once you've found page 154, you've seen the title, Declaration of Independence, see if you can find any mention of Native people in this list of reasons why America ought to be free and independent. Native people are brought up precisely once in the Declaration of Independence, and they are not called Native. They are called not just Indian either. They are called the merciless Indian savages. What you have before you is a letter George Washington wrote to a guy named John Sullivan. John Sullivan was in charge of attacking Native tribes, specifically the Haudenosaunee tribes of Western New York, also known as the Iroquois. Now, in the Declaration of Independence, writers like Ben Franklin, who you've heard of, and Thomas Jefferson, who maybe you know, were quick to label Native people as merciless Indian savages who targeted women and children. And that's why they were savage, because they targeted women and children, right? They're just undistinguished destruction of everything in front of them. That's what's making them savage. But how did Washington ask his own men to behave? And is there what we call a double standard, where Native people do it, they're savage. But when I command my men to do it as part of a war, it's something else. And so when students are exposed to those sources and then they go back and look at what the children's books are intentionally leaving out, it's eye-opening. It's this idea that they were told a certain story at a certain age so they could swallow what they could for what was appropriate at that age, but that wasn't the whole story, that there was more to learn, that they need to widen their focus, open their eyes more, and consider more than they ever had before. And that kind of eye-opening is empowering. It shows students that there is more to their education than just the tales we often tell ourselves. It is what they can find in their research. It is what they can find in their own head as they reflect on the things they find. I would encourage all Montana teachers to really look into Indian Ed for All resources that are available on the OPI website. It's an easy to use database where you can access all sorts of lessons for all sorts of age levels for all sorts of subjects. I do it myself regularly, and the ease with which you can find these and use these sources makes Indian Ed for All something we can all do. I also appreciate that the state of Montana is very supportive about providing classes for Indian Ed for All and how to integrate it into your lessons. So I would encourage all Montana teachers to take classes on Indian Ed for All. I think you'll find it very enriching, and I think your students will find it enriching too.